Dr. Howard Conyers right after this. Stick around. Be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. And we are talking with Dr. Howard Conyers. Appreciate you hanging with me through the break there. So we've kind of gone through the list. So here's what I've been able to quickly surmise. Tell me if I'm wrong or right as I say this statement. People that are going to get into the Barbecue Hall of Fame this year, in your opinion, have more media generation behind them versus time in barbecue per se, or any other accolades or anything. It's the media hype that's going to get whoever is in these final three.
I do believe so. I believe that's a large part of it. I may be proven wrong with one, but that's very important.
I don't want to go against my man Meathead, but I think we should make a $5 bet, which of course I would never pay off because I'm terrible at paying off bets. But in theory, we make a $5 bet that Meathead does not get in. I'll bet against if you want to bet for.
No, I think you're right. I think Aaron Franklin would get in. Stubbs probably would get in. I mean, honestly, I believe Stubbs would.
I agree with that.
And the third one would probably be I'm drawing a blank who I think the third one would be. It's tough. I believe.
I think I want to agree that Aaron Franklin. Well, I don't want to agree, but I tend to agree with you that I think Aaron Franklin might get in. I don't think he shouldn't get in, but I don't necessarily think he should get in at the same time. I don't think Meathead's going to get in as much as I love Meathead, and I'm saying it with peace and love. I think Desiree Robinson is absolutely going to get in. I think if we're looking at, marking off the boxes of diversity, you have a black and a woman, and she's alive, and her food is absolutely fantastic. It's a Memphis staple. So I think she's checking off all the boxes. I think she probably gets in the easiest. Of course, I'm probably wrong, and I've jinxed her, and I apologize in advance, Desiree. And I agree that Stubbs is probably going to get in. And then I'm vacillating between Lem's Barbecue and Wayne Monk, because I think you have, North Carolina barbecue. I think North Carolina barbecue right now is popular. You're seeing a lot of Sam Jones going around, and
right.
With Sam Jones barbecue, and then of course you have the Skylight Inn attached with that. So I think just maybe through some recognition of North Carolina right now, because he does also have that book out, that you might see a Wayne Monk, a Desiree Robinson, and a CB Stubblefield. That's my pick for 2019.
Okay, I mean, it's a tough one, but I think you're right. I mean, like one person she didn't make the list would have been like somebody like Helen Turner. I don't know if you heard of Helen Turner.
Yes.
In Brownsville, Tennessee.
Yep.
This woman had been stoking the coals for like 30 years, about 30 years, I believe. And like she didn't make the cut this year, but she's somebody who I believe be deserving, sort of like Miss Tootsie Snowden. Like she shoveled the coals.
And at 80, I think she's like 82. I believe, and this probably won't come as a shock, but most people could physically assault me easily. But I think Tootsie could probably kick my ass. She could probably kick our ass, if we're being honest.
She probably could. Yeah. I mean, like she got in last year, but I'm pretty sure she could.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about stories that you think should be told from, like, what African-American story in barbecue is dying to be told, or what stories need to be told in that relation?
What African-American story? I think it's hard to put an individual name on an African-American story from the stories that need to be told, because I think people need to see what happened with African-Americans from the 1800s to like the 1960s. A lot of times those names weren't listed or credited, but I think there's enough history there for a complete story to be told about that narrative. of cooking in the ground well before they got to these fancy cookers, whether it's an Oiler cooker, Old Hickory, Lang, these indirect smokers. There's a story there. And I believe like when you go to like Smitty's or go to Lockhart, you see a lot of like Mexican pitmasters now, but I know it was some black guys there too. Just what happened, what those guys did to create to perfect the barbecue as we know it, that we kind of we celebrate. Like even with Memphis in May, for example, one of the earliest winners in Memphis in May for sauce categories was an African American woman, and it was during the same time that this guy probably had a 10 up. Mm-hmm. But we really don't know much about this particular woman.
When you look back in history, and we kind of chatted about this offline the other night, if you're looking to get names into whether it's this BBQ Hall of Fame or if a writer is looking to go back and do a history of barbecue cooking as it relates to African Americans, slaves specifically, no surprise that if you were a slave back then, you weren't treated like a regular human being. You weren't documented good. So we're not probably going to find your name and where you lived and what address you were staying at. There's just no documentation for you to go back and say, okay, well, these 500 or these 800 people were some of the most prolific barbecue cooks that were cooking for the people on the plantation or what have you. You just can't find them.
You can't find it. And that's what I realized, like when the stories that I've been passed, Greg, a lot of stuff been passed orally. Like I could tell you almost 80 or 90 years of pitmasters of my genealogy, but these individuals don't have no names. The only reason I know who they are because my father told me who these individuals were.
So it's a tough it's a tough thing to be able to rectify when you have no way of going back in order to give proper recognition. And the other thing that we were talking about the other night was as you are learning how to do whole hog from your dad and family members and stuff, and then you start to go out and see barbecue and competition barbecue, there's not a lot of black guys that are out there doing competition barbecue. It's a lot of white guys. When I'm growing up, and I didn't grow up in a predominantly black neighborhood by any stretch, but the stereotype for me was that the black guys knew how to do good barbecue. But when I got into barbecue, 14 years ago, when I got my first smoker and I started talking with people, I didn't see one black guy, and I'm like, well, what the hell is going on here? All I ever thought was black guys knew how to do the best barbecue, but all I'm seeing is white guys. I mean, it's a pretty weird juxtaposition.
It is, and I saw it a couple of times when I did a couple of competitions, but then what I realized it came down to is economics, and a lot of black folks don't have the economics just to be disposable income to be throwing out for a competition event, because not only you got to cook the food, but you got to be able to get there. You got to be able to field the team. You got to pay the registration fees. It's a whole lot goes into doing competition barbecue. And I know I could, like, for example, Memphis in May, I wouldn't want to spend $20,000 or $30,000 for a weekend.
I don't even want to spend $600 for a weekend going to a competition, let alone $20,000 and $30,000. So, I mean, is there something that you can at least propose or something that you would like to see over a certain period of time in order to bring awareness to any of this?
So what I would like to see, like some of the major competitions, like they bring people such as myself who, like I could give you a clear history of American barbecue over 120 something years or maybe 200, because very few individuals have a direct knowledge of how pits in the ground were constructed. Because that's how my father learned how to cook barbecue. He learned how to cook barbecue in the ground, and not what I'm talking about in Hawaii, but what they did in the American South on plant sharecroppers in this community, and that's how they cook barbecue up until like the 70s.
Wow.
And then when you start seeing like cookers being made out of old fuel tanks, you see the transition. I even knew the transition of when like gas cookers start coming about in North Carolina, in the Carolinas, how guys made those first gas hog roasters. Even though I don't like gas, but a lot of people started cooking with gas.
Because it's convenient. It's convenient, right?
It's convenient.
Yeah. You don't have to do the burn barrels and throw coals all night and all
Cool.
that stuff. You just light the gas and away you go.
And where you go. But so I think what I think would be helpful is some of these bigger competitions, they invite people who really understand the tradition, who grew up in the tradition. Now, you can invite people who write from an academic, but like you need to invite people who also is a practitioner. They may not be your most polished individual, but they really know the subject. So for example, there's a pit master named Mr. Grady in North Carolina, Grady's Barbecue.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is he's like 82 years old, but he's an expert on pit cook barbecue. Like his knowledge of oral history, you have to respect that. He probably don't share it a lot because it's something special to him, but you have to kind of like coach these individuals to share their stories.
We're talking with Dr. Howard Conyers, howardconyers.com, his website. You are heading to Memphis in May, as you had teased a couple different times through the interview. Are you going to just take in the majesty of the competition? Are you going there for specific reasons?
I'm going because my wife's family is going to meet in Memphis. But as an engineer, I love seeing the ingenuity behind these pits and smokers these guys use and women use to execute barbecue. It's always amazing to me to see the devices they come up with.
Because you are a whole hog cook by love, will you naturally be more attracted to the teams that are whole hog cookers, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, because I see a lot of people cooking whole hogs in like Old Hickory, and to me, some of these smokers I've seen, you could kind of set it, you could get it up to temperature, and you set it and go and put Bluetooth monitoring. To me, yeah, while that's cooking, it's not an art form to that. So I'm just get more amazement by just some of just the overall equipment and how people go about achieving the end product.
Are you a fan of Sam Jones?
I mean, I respect what he's doing. I don't have a problem with Sam Jones. I haven't met him personally.
Oh.
The story behind Sam Jones is I would love to know who all was working in the pits behind Sam Jones and his family over the years, because I think it was some people who cooked the barbecue in the restaurant that probably had a richer story.
When you go to a Memphis in May, will you also be like chronicling? I mean, is that part of your makeup? Will you always be looking for a story or something like this, or are you just looking to take it in?
I'm just looking to take it in. I mean, I know I got a couple of guys there, a couple of teams there, so I'm just looking to fellowship and not really chronicling anything, seeing what the teams are doing, meeting some folks that I maybe follow on social media. Other than that, I'm not really going there looking for a big story. To me, Memphis in May is not a story for the barbecue. Like, I'm a very traditionalist, and I don't think Memphis in May lends itself to very traditional barbecue.
You mentioned
as
it.
Most competition.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned it at the top, the term, and we gotta ask you about it, pitmaster. And I agree. This is a term that is kind of a hot button term here over the last couple years. And I've asked any number of people to sit there and define it for me. So let me ask you, as the term pitmaster, what does that mean to you? And I think the thing that makes it such a, I don't want to say controversial term, but something that we can argue back and forth about is the term master, which would lead you to believe that there has been some attainment of the highest levels of skill, which I think is complete bullshit. I think pitmaster is the worst term. It should be, as you said, like pit cook or pit boss or somebody that's managing the fire, depending on what you're cooking at. But how would you define the term pitmaster?
First of all, what I would like to say is pitmaster is a relatively new term that came out because of a show called Pitmasters. Growing up, I never heard the term. I didn't hear that term until probably the last 10 to 15 years. How I would define pitmaster is somebody who could cook just about any meat on anything. And it took myself a long time to really accept the title of being called a pitmaster. And I had to prove to myself that I was a pitmaster. And let me tell you why I had to prove to myself I was a pitmaster. I cooked in the ground. I have cooked on cinder blocks. I have cooked on refrigerators. I have cooked on a new pit. I have cooked lamb, goats, hogs, turkeys, chickens, and a whole cow, throughout this journey of barbecue, and most of this journey in the past 5 years, I went back because for the probably 20 years of my life, all I was doing was cooking a whole hog in one location. But cooking those other animals that I just spoke about,
mm-hmm.
That's not an easy feat. Not many individuals have pit cooked barbecue like that, and designed the apparatus to cook it on. Because you can't be a pit master if you can't go to the store and buy the equipment that you're cooking on. At least from the guys that I learned from, they had to bake everything they needed to make this end product.
You just mentioned something that I meant to ask you about as we were talking about the past. Whole cow barbecue. Rarely do you hear whole cow. You hear whole hog all the time, obviously, but whole cow barbecue is something that was way more common way back when than you ever see. I don't even know if you see whole cow anymore even.
You see very few whole cows. You see people cooking a whole cow in a saddle style, but you very rarely see anybody cooking whole cow in the American style of pit cooked barbecue that's talked about in the literature. And that's what I went back and did last year is reproduce pit cooked barbecue cow, or they call it steer or ox in the literature. They didn't necessarily refer to it as cow. They call it either steer or ox. And I wanted to reproduce that because I haven't seen that.
From a style standpoint, is it akin to whole hog or is it a whole different situation?
Oh, I cooked it just like whole hog. Mm-hmm. I mean, that all the literature that I read from like old archives, they said they will cook whole cow just like they cook whole hog. And so I want to verify the process was tried and true. I want to go back and reproduce it in that manner.
So what kind of an end product do you end up with? Is it something a little bit more like beef barbecue-esque, or is it something different?
Actually, it came almost like pulled pork.
Really?
Like the one I cooked, it came out like pulled pork, and it was moist. People might think it wasn't moist, but it was very moist because like I mopped it the whole time.
So can we hire Dr. Howard Conyers to come up to Cleveland, Ohio, and actually do a whole cow if we could get our hands on one, or like what's your travel schedule like?
Man, if people could afford it, because that's a labor of love right there, Greg. Honestly, that's a labor of love.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I have the device to cook it, but the amount of time and effort that goes into it, it's not a easy undertaking. Like I'm exhausted.
Easier things to do than do whole cow, right?
It's easier things to do than whole cow. But it's great though. I tell you, that's the best barbecue I ever had in my life.
Ever?
Wow.
That's saying something right there. Whole cow barbecue. I want to say whole hog just because it rolls off the tongue, but whole cow barbecue. We are talking with Dr. Howard Conyers. You can find him on the website, howardconyers.com. And if you are lucky enough and going to be in Memphis in May this weekend, you might see him carousing around and checking out the sights and the sounds of the competition and so forth. So, Doctor, really appreciate you coming on the show this evening. Hopefully this isn't the last time. We can have you on again here from time to time, talk about some cool stuff. But really appreciate the time tonight. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
You got it. There he is. Dr. Howard Conyers on the Fogo Charcoal Hotline talking about a number of topics. Whole cow barbecue. Whole cow.